the secret that shattered a family. Before we dive into this powerful story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. This one will leave you reflecting on life's toughest choices. L of continuity from the last paragraph. Escriva en grande cantidad. Content warning. This story contains themes of family drama, emotional conflict, and personal growth, while staying appropriate. The morning sun streamed through billowing silk curtains as Thomas made his way down the spiral staircase, each step echoing against marble floors that seemed to amplify the emptiness of their grand home. The scent of French roasted coffee and freshly baked pastries wafted from the kitchen. Another perfect performance orchestrated by their live-in chef, Marco. "Thomas, darling," Eleanor called out, her voice carrying that practiced melody of upper-class refinement. "Your father needs you in his study before breakfast." She sat perfectly poised at the breakfast nook, her Hermes scarf arranged just so, scanning social calendars with the intensity of a military strategist. The walk to his father's study felt like a march to judgment. William Hayes's domain was a testament to old money, walls lined with leather-bound books he'd never read, display cases showcasing hunting trophies from safaris he'd never enjoyed, each element carefully chosen to tell the story of success he'd scripted for himself. "Come in," William's voice commanded before Thomas could even knock. His father stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, silhouetted against the morning light, a living monument to power and prestige. "We need to discuss your future at Hayes Industries." Thomas felt his chest tighten. These discussions had become more frequent as graduation approached, each one feeling like another brick in the wall of his predetermined life. "Yes, father. I've arranged for you to begin shadowing our board members next month. It's time you understand the full scope of what you'll be inheriting." William turned, his steel-gray eyes evaluating his son with the same calculating gaze he used in boardroom negotiations. "The Hayes legacy spans 3 generations. We don't merely run a business. We shape the future of this city." Downstairs, Sarah's piano playing had stopped, replaced by the gentle murmur of social pleasantries as Eleanor greeted the first of her morning visitors, likely another committee meeting for the upcoming charity season. The Hayes household operated like a well-oiled machine, each member playing their assigned role and maintaining their carefully curated image. "I understand," Thomas replied, the words tasting bitter on his tongue. But did he? Understanding seemed to be the last thing he possessed as he stood in that study, drowning in expectations that felt increasingly foreign to his own desires. The morning light caught the crystal decanter on his father's desk, casting prismatic shadows across imported mahogany. Thomas watched them dance, remembering simpler times when he and Sarah would chase rainbows through the garden, before they learned that Hayes' children were above such frivolous pursuits. "Your great-grandfather built this empire from nothing," William continued, his voice carrying the weight of generational ambition. "He arrived in Dallas with $5 in his pocket and a dream. Through sheer determination and cunning, he established the foundation of what we have today. Your grandfather expanded that vision, and I've taken it to new heights." He paused, fixing Thomas with an expectant stare. "The question is, son, what will be your contribution to the Hayes legacy?" The weight of that question seemed to press against Thomas's chest, making it difficult to breathe in the perfectly climate-controlled air of the study. Outside, a gardener meticulously trimmed the hedges into geometric perfection, another small detail in the carefully maintained facade of Hayes excellence. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her school uniform pressed to perfection, her face a mask of practiced politeness. "Father, Mother says breakfast is served." Her eyes met Thomas's briefly, conveying silent support in the way only siblings who share the same burden can understand. As they made their way to the dining room, Thomas noticed the slight tremor in Sarah's hands, a telltale sign of her own internal struggles. She'd been spending more time in her room lately, poring over medical textbooks hidden beneath fashion magazines, nursing a dream she dared not speak aloud in their father's presence. The dining room table stretched before them like a runway, each place setting a testament to Eleanor's obsession with perfection. Wedgwood china gleamed under the crystal chandelier, silverware aligned with mathematical precision. Their mother sat at her usual place, her iPad propped beside her plate as she coordinated the upcoming season's social calendar. "The Whitman's Gala is next weekend," Eleanor announced, her fingers dancing across the screen. Thomas, Caroline Whitman will be there. She's just returned from her semester at Sciences Po in Paris. Such a lovely girl, and from an excellent family. The implied meaning wasn't lost on Thomas. Everything in their world came with strings attached, even potential relationships. Caroline Whitman represented another perfectly aligned piece in the Hayes family puzzle. Educated at the right schools, connected to the right families, groomed for a life of social prominence. Sarah pushed her food around her plate, a habit she developed whenever conversations turned to the careful curation of their social lives. "May I be excused? I have a student council meeting before first period." "Of course, darling," Eleanor replied, barely looking up from her iPad. "Don't forget you have your fitting for the gala dress this afternoon. I've arranged for Vera Wong's team to come to the house." The mention of the fitting seemed to deflate Sarah further. Thomas watched as she gathered her things, her movements precise and controlled, just as they'd been taught. But he could see the weight of expectation pressing down on her shoulders, making her seem smaller than her 16 years. As Sarah left, Thomas caught a glimpse of a medical school brochure peeking out from her bag. Johns Hopkins, he thought, his sister's secret rebellion, carried out in whispered dreams and hidden literature. He wondered if she felt as trapped as he did in this gilded cage they called home. From the glimpse of Sarah's hidden medical school brochure, Thomas felt a surge of protective instinct for his sister, mixed with a gnawing realization about his own situation. He excused himself from the breakfast table, his mother barely acknowledging his departure as she continued orchestrating their social lives through her iPad. In the hallway, massive oil paintings of Hayes' ancestors stared down at him, stern faces that seemed to judge his every move, every thought of deviation from the prescribed path. The morning light streaming through stained glass windows cast colored shadows across their faces, making them appear almost ghostly in their ornate frames. Thomas reached his private study, a room that was supposed to be his sanctuary but felt more like another stage set in their elaborate production of success. The mahogany desk, inherited from his grandfather, held stacks of business prospectuses and market analyses, his father's idea of light reading for a teenager. His phone buzzed with a message from his best friend, Marcus Chen, whose family owned one of the largest tech companies in Asia. Their friendship was, of course, parent-approved and socially advantageous. But unlike most relationships in Thomas's world, this one had grown into something genuine over years of shared experiences and mutual understanding. "Still on for basketball after school?" Marcus's text read. "Need to escape the family pressure, cooker for a while." Thomas smiled, remembering how they'd bonded over their similar circumstances. Both heirs to massive fortunes, both suffocating under the weight of legacy. The basketball court at their private school had become their refuge, a place where they could temporarily shed their perfectly tailored uniforms and just be teenagers. He glanced at his schedule, meticulously managed by his father's assistant. Between the board meeting's shadowing session and the mandatory dinner with potential investors, there was a small window of freedom. "I'll make it work," he typed back. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Sarah stood there, her eyes red-rimmed but her posture perfect. They'd both learned early that tears were acceptable only in private. "Tommy," she said, using the childhood nickname she reserved for their rare moments of vulnerability, "I can't do this anymore." Her voice trembled slightly, but her chin remained high, a haze to the core even in her distress. Thomas crossed the room in 3 strides, closing the door behind her. "In this house, even walls had ears." "What happened?" "Mother's arranged for me to intern at Hayes Industries this summer. She's already told her friends I'll be learning the family business." Sarah's fingers twisted the strap of her designer bag. "But Johns Hopkins has this amazing summer program for high school students interested in medicine. I could actually learn about what I love, what I want to do with my life." Thomas felt his heart squeeze. He'd watched Sarah's passion for medicine grow over the years, witnessed her sneaking medical textbooks into her room, seen her eyes light up whenever they passed hospitals. It was the only time she truly came alive, much like how he felt when working on his secret photography projects. Another passion he kept hidden from their parents. "Have you told them about the program?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Sarah laughed bitterly, the sound too harsh for her 16 years. "Father would say it's a waste of time. Mother would worry what the board members' wives would think if I chose medicine over the family business. You know how it works in this house. Appearances above all else. Thomas walked to his window, overlooking the meticulously landscaped gardens where their childhood games had once echoed. Now, like everything else in their world, the gardens existed purely for show, beautiful but sterile, maintained but unlived in. What if, he started, an idea forming in his mind, what if we both made a stand? Together? He turned to face his sister, seeing hope flicker across her features. What do you mean? I've been thinking about taking a gap year after graduation, he admitted for the first time aloud. Not to travel the world like the other trust fund kids, but to study photography seriously, to create something that's truly mine, not just another chapter in the Hayes legacy. Sarah's eyes widened. In their world, deviating from the prescribed path was akin to heresy. Father would never allow it. Maybe it's time we stopped asking for permission, Thomas said, his voice stronger than he felt. You're brilliant, Sarah. You could be an amazing doctor. And I need to find out who I am beyond being William Hayes's son. The siblings looked at each other, years of shared silence and suppressed dreams hanging between them. The morning sun cast their shadows on the study wall, two figures standing straight and tall, no longer bowing under the weight of expectations. The gala next weekend, Sarah said slowly. Everyone who matters in Dallas society will be there. If we're going to make a stand, that would be the time to do it. Thomas nodded, understanding the significance. In their world, timing was everything. The gala would be the perfect stage. Their parents couldn't react too strongly in front of their carefully cultivated social circle. We'll need a plan, he said, moving to his desk and pulling out a notebook. Not the monogrammed leather one his father had given him, but a simple spiral-bound one he'd bought himself. And we'll need allies. Sarah sat across from him, her posture relaxing slightly as they began to plot their future. For the first time in years, they felt like children again, sharing secrets and supporting each other's dreams. Outside, the gardeners continued their endless task of maintaining perfection, unaware that inside the mansion's walls, the carefully constructed facade of the Hayes family was about to face its greatest challenge. The morning sun climbed higher in the Dallas sky, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn, shadows that seemed to hint at the changes to come. The quiet scratching of pen on paper filled Thomas's study as the siblings began crafting their plan. Years of watching their father navigate business deals had taught them the importance of strategy, of considering every angle and preparing for all contingencies. Marcus could help, Thomas said, writing his friend's name. His parents are important enough that ours have to listen when he speaks. And he understands what we're going through. Sarah nodded, then added, and Emma Blackwood. Her older sister went against their family's wishes to become a human rights lawyer instead of joining their law firm. She succeeded, and now their parents actually brag about her work. The list of potential allies grew as morning turned to afternoon. Each name represented a crack in the perfect facade of Dallas high society. Children who had dared to dream differently, families who had learned to value happiness over appearances. Mr. Rodriguez, Sarah suddenly exclaimed. Their high school guidance counselor had always seemed to see through the polished veneer of his wealthy students, offering quiet support to those struggling under the weight of family expectations. Thomas remembered how Mr. Rodriguez had quietly slipped him a brochure for a prestigious photography workshop last semester, his eyes knowing but kind. He could help with the practical side, college applications, program recommendations. A soft chime from Thomas's phone interrupted their planning. Another message from his father's assistant. Mr. Hayes requests your presence at the board meeting in 30 minutes. Car waiting outside. Reality crashed back in, heavy and demanding. Thomas looked at Sarah, seeing his own determination reflected in her eyes. We have 1 week until the gala. Everything has to be perfect, more perfect than anything Mother's ever planned. Because this time, we're the ones staging the performance, Sarah finished his thought, a slight smile playing at her lips. The next few days passed in a carefully choreographed dance of compliance and secret preparation. Thomas attended his father's board meetings, asking all the right questions, playing the role of the dutiful heir. Sarah went to her gala dress fittings, complimenting her mother's choices while quietly researching medical school prerequisites on her phone. In the evenings, they met in Thomas's study, their plans growing more detailed with each passing day. Marcus proved an invaluable ally, using his tech expertise to help them gather information and create backup plans. Emma Blackwood shared her sister's story, offering practical advice on handling family opposition. Mr. Rodriguez provided quiet support, helping Sarah compile a stellar application for the Johns Hopkins summer program and connecting Thomas with renowned photographers who had turned their passion into successful careers. The siblings learned that they weren't alone in their struggle. Behind the perfect facades of Dallas's wealthiest families, other young people were fighting similar battles, seeking ways to be true to themselves while honoring their family's legacy. As the week progressed, they discovered strength they didn't know they possessed. Thomas found himself speaking up more in board meetings, not just agreeing with everything his father said. Sarah began leaving medical journals visible on her desk, small acts of defiance that went curiously uncommented on. The day before the gala, Eleanor was in full command mode, directing an army of staff in transforming their already impressive home into something out of a fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers were cleaned until they sparkled like diamonds. Fresh flowers arrived by the truckload, and caterers worked tirelessly in the kitchen. Thomas and Sarah watched the preparations from the second-floor landing, both thinking how this event, meant to showcase the Hayes family's power and prestige, would instead become the stage for their bid for independence. "Are you scared?" Sarah whispered, her hand finding his like when they were children. Terrified, Thomas admitted, "But for the first time, I'm also excited about the future." That evening, their father called a family meeting in his study, a pre-gala tradition where he would remind them of their roles in maintaining the family's image. William Hayes stood before the fireplace, his imposing figure backlit by dancing flames. "Tomorrow night is crucial," he began, his voice carrying the weight of generations. "The Whitman merger depends largely on the impressions we make. Thomas, I expect you to pay particular attention to Caroline. Sarah, the Whitman's youngest son, will be attending. He's only a year older than you." Thomas felt Sarah stiffen beside him, but maintain her pleasant expression. Their mother sat perfectly poised in her armchair, nodding approvingly at their father's words. "The Hayes name opens doors," William continued, "but it also carries responsibilities. Everything we have, everything we are, has been built on maintaining certain standards, certain expectations." As their father spoke, Thomas looked around the study, seeing it with new eyes. The leather-bound books, the hunting trophies, the oil paintings, all carefully chosen to tell a story of power and success. But whose story was it really? And at what cost had it been maintained? Later that night, unable to sleep, Thomas stood at his window, camera in hand. The moon cast silver light across the garden, transforming it from a display of wealth into something almost magical. He took several photos, capturing the interplay of light and shadow, the way the carefully manicured hedges created patterns in the darkness. In her room, Sarah sat surrounded by medical textbooks and college brochures, finally free to study openly as the house slept. The siblings had agreed. No more hiding who they were or what they wanted. Tomorrow would change everything. As Dallas's elite families prepared their finest clothes and practiced their social smiles, as caterers finalized menus and florists arranged the last bouquets, as their parents reviewed seating charts and talking points, Thomas and Sarah Hayes prepared for something entirely different. The moment they would finally become the authors of their own stories. The morning of the gala dawned bright and clear, the Texas sun casting long shadows across the Hayes estate. Thomas woke early, watching the army of workers transform their already immaculate grounds into a fairy tale setting. White tints bloomed like exotic flowers on the lawn. Crystal chandeliers suspended from their peaks caught the morning light, throwing rainbows across the dewy grass. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Everything's set. Emma's got the presentations ready. You sure about this?" Thomas took a deep breath, typing back a single word, "Yes." The day unfolded like a well-rehearsed play. Eleanor floated through the house in a silk robe, directing staff with the precision of a military commander. William remained sequestered in his study, making last-minute calls to ensure every business associate knew exactly what was at stake tonight. Sarah appeared in Thomas's doorway at noon, her face pale but determined. "The Whitman's youngest son just texted me," she said, closing the door quietly behind her. "Mother gave him my number. He wants to discuss our future over dinner tonight." Thomas felt a surge of protective anger. Well, he's in for a surprise. He pulled out their carefully prepared USB drive from his desk drawer. "Emma finished the presentation last night. Want to see?" The siblings huddled over Thomas's laptop, watching as Emma's masterful digital storytelling brought their dreams to life. Photos of Sarah volunteering at local hospitals dissolved into statistics about the growing need for dedicated physicians. Thomas's photographs, landscapes, portraits, moments of raw humanity captured in black and white, told their own story of passion and purpose. "It's perfect," Sarah whispered, wiping a tear from her cheek. "But do you think they'll even let us show it?" "That's where Marcus comes in," Thomas reminded her. "The technical setup is all under his control. Once we start, they can't stop it without causing a scene. And if there's one thing our parents hate more than disobedience, it's public embarrassment," Sarah finished, managing a small smile. The afternoon passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Eleanor's chosen hairstylist worked on Sarah's dark waves, while Thomas endured a professional shave and styling. Their mother flitted between them, adjusting, critiquing, perfecting. "Remember," she instructed as Sarah was helped into her custom Vera Wang gown, "the Whitmans are key to our future. Caroline will be looking for signs that you're ready for a serious relationship, Thomas. And Sarah, dear, Richard Whitman Jr. is already being groomed to take over their Asia operations." Thomas caught Sarah's eye in the mirror, seeing his own determination reflected back. Their mother's words, once so heavy with expectation, now seemed to hold less power. Tonight, they would rewrite the script. As the sun began to set, guests started arriving. Dallas's elite stepped from luxury cars onto the red carpet Eleanor had insisted upon, their jewelry catching the light from carefully positioned photographers. William stood at the entrance, every inch the successful patriarch, greeting each arrival with practiced charm. Thomas adjusted his bow tie, watching from his window as Caroline Whitman emerged from a Rolls-Royce, her golden hair gleaming in the evening light. In another life, perhaps he would have played his part, courted her as expected, merged their families' empires. But not tonight. Marcus arrived early, as planned, immediately heading to the technical setup under the guise of checking the sound system for his father's speech. Emma Blackwood and her family followed, her sister the successful human rights lawyer causing quite a stir among the traditionally conservative crowd. Sarah appeared at Thomas's door, resplendent in deep blue silk that made her look older than her 16 years. "It's time," she said simply. They descended the grand staircase together, playing their parts one last time. William beamed with pride as they joined him in greeting guests, clearly pleased with how his children embodied the Hayes legacy. If he noticed the strange confidence in their bearing, the subtle glances they exchanged, he gave no sign. The gala unfolded according to Eleanor's precise schedule. Cocktails flowed, conversation hummed, business deals were delicately discussed behind raised champagne glasses. Thomas dutifully danced with Caroline, discussing her time in Paris while carefully avoiding any hint of future plans. Sarah allowed Richard Jr. to monopolize her time, nodding politely at his detailed descriptions of Asian market expansion. At exactly 9 o'clock, William Hayes took the stage that had been set up in the grand ballroom. "Distinguished guests," he began, his voice carrying easily through the speakers Marcus had so carefully checked earlier. "Tonight we celebrate not just success, but legacy." Thomas squeezed Sarah's hand as their father spoke about family tradition, about the responsibility of carrying forward a powerful name. They watched as he gestured proudly toward them, describing the bright future ahead as the next generation prepared to take the reins. Then, precisely as planned, the lights dimmed slightly, and the massive screen behind William came to life. Not with the corporate presentation he expected, but with something entirely different. The room fell silent as Sarah's voice, clear and confident, filled the space. What does legacy truly mean? On screen, images of her volunteering at hospitals played, interspersed with statistics about healthcare needs and medical innovations. Is it following a predetermined path, or is it having the courage to forge new ones? Before William could react, The presentation smoothly transitioned to Thomas's photography, powerful images that captured moments of genuine human connection, of beauty found in unexpected places. His voice joined Sarah's. Our great-grandfather built something from nothing because he had the courage to follow his dreams. Tonight, we honor that legacy not by following in his footsteps, but by following his example. The ballroom erupted in murmurs as the siblings stepped onto the stage, standing tall beside their father. William's face had gone pale, but in front of hundreds of guests, he could only stand frozen as his children declared their independence. As Thomas and Sarah stood on stage, their hearts pounding but their voices steady, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. Eleanor had risen from her seat, her perfectly manicured hand pressed to her throat, while William remained motionless, his facade of control cracking ever so slightly. The Hayes legacy, Thomas continued, his voice carrying clearly through the speakers Marcus had positioned, isn't about maintaining what was. It's about having the courage to build something new. He gestured to the photographs still cycling on the screen. Images that showed beauty in unexpected places, humanity in unguarded moments. Sarah stepped forward, her blue gown catching the stage lights. Medicine isn't a rebellion against our family's values, she declared, her voice stronger than she felt. It's an extension of them. Our businesses have always been about building, about creating value. What greater value is there than saving lives? The screen behind them shifted to show Sarah's volunteer work at local hospitals, her perfect grades in science classes, and letters of recommendation from respected doctors who had mentored her. The images dissolved into statistics about the impact of dedicated physicians, about breakthroughs in medical research led by people who dared to follow their calling. In the audience, Emma Blackwood's sister stood up, starting a slow applause that began to spread through the crowd. Other young faces in the audience, children of privilege who had their own hidden dreams, joined in, their support growing louder. William finally moved, stepping toward his children with an unreadable expression. The room tensed, waiting for his reaction, but before he could speak, Caroline Whitman's voice rang out from the crowd. "Thomas's photography is extraordinary," she called, surprising everyone. "My father's gallery in Paris would be honored to show such talent." The elder Whitman, despite his apparent shock, nodded slowly. He was, after all, a businessman who recognized opportunity. "Indeed," he said, his voice carrying, "the arts and medicine, both prestigious fields. The Hayes name could carry significant weight in these areas." Thomas and Sarah exchanged glances, hardly daring to believe what they were hearing. Their careful planning had accounted for opposition, for anger, but not for this potential acceptance. Eleanor, having recovered her composure, glided onto the stage with practiced grace. "The Hayes family has always been at the forefront of innovation," she announced, smoothly taking control of the narrative. "We're thrilled to support our children as they expand our legacy into new and meaningful directions." The room erupted in applause, some genuine, some merely polite, but all contributing to a moment of transformation. William, recognizing the shift in the room, did what any successful businessman would do. He adapted. "My children," he said, his voice catching slightly, "have shown tonight the very spirit that built our family's success. The courage to forge new paths, to see opportunities others might miss." He placed a hand on each of their shoulders, and for the first time in years, his touch felt more paternal than proprietary. The rest of the evening became a blur of congratulations and conversations. Business leaders who had come expecting to discuss mergers instead found themselves engaged in passionate discussions about healthcare innovation and the power of visual storytelling. Art collectors who had attended merely for social obligation began examining Thomas's photographs with genuine interest. Sarah found herself surrounded by a group of doctors, wives who had secretly wished their own children would pursue medicine. They offered connections, mentoring opportunities, and their full support. Thomas was deep in conversation with gallery owners and artistic directors, his portfolio passing from hand to hand. Marcus and Emma watched from the sidelines, sharing satisfied smiles. Their part in the evening's transformation had been crucial, but would remain their secret. As the night wore on, the formal atmosphere of the gala softened into something more genuine. Even Eleanor, after several glasses of champagne, admitted to Sarah that she had always wanted to be a pianist before family obligations intervened. In a quiet moment, Thomas found his father standing alone on the terrace, staring out at the illuminated gardens. "Dad," he started, but William raised a hand to stop him. "I built my life around protecting and expanding what my father gave me," William said quietly. "I never stopped to ask if that was what you and Sarah needed." He turned to face his son, his expression softer than Thomas had seen in years. "Your great-grandfather would have loved your photographs. He was an artist too. Did you know that? Before he built his first business, he used to sketch building designs. Some of his original drawings are still in my office." Sarah joined them, still glowing from an impromptu mentoring session with a renowned surgeon. William looked at his children, really looked at them, perhaps for the first time seeing them as individuals rather than extensions of his legacy. "We have a lot to talk about," he said finally, "a lot to figure out. But tonight you made me proud in ways I never expected." Inside, the party continued, but out on the terrace, something more important was happening. A family was beginning to rebuild itself, not on the foundations of obligation and expectation, but on something stronger: understanding and acceptance. Out on the terrace, the warm Dallas night enveloped the Hayes family in a moment of unprecedented honesty. Eleanor joined them, her social mask softening as she saw her husband and children together, vulnerable and real for the first time in years. "I suppose," she said, smoothing her designer gown with slightly trembling hands, "we all have some dreams we've kept hidden." She looked at Sarah with new eyes. "Your grandmother, my mother, was a nurse before she married into society. She never spoke of it much, but I remember how alive she seemed when helping others." The family stood together, the sounds of the gala floating through the open French doors behind them, creating a soundtrack to their transformation. The perfectly manicured garden before them seemed different somehow, less a showcase of wealth and more a space of possibility. "We need to discuss practical matters," William said, his business mind never completely at rest. "Sarah, the Johns Hopkins summer program, we'll need to look at the requirements, make arrangements. And Thomas, if you're serious about photography, we should consider the best way to approach it professionally." "I've already been accepted to the program," Sarah admitted quietly. "Mr. Rodriguez helped me apply months ago. I was afraid to tell you." Instead of the anger they might have expected, William nodded thoughtfully. "Rodriguez, he sees potential in students, doesn't he? We should increase the school's art and science funding." He turned to Thomas. "And your photographs, they tell stories I never knew needed telling. Perhaps Hayes Industries could benefit from seeing the world through a different lens." Eleanor dabbed at her eyes carefully, decades of makeup discipline not entirely forgotten even in this emotional moment. "The guest house," she said suddenly, "it has that wonderful natural light. We could convert it into a studio for Thomas." The siblings exchanged glances, hardly daring to believe this swift shift from resistance to support. But there was something genuine in their parents' tone, a relief almost, as if they too had been freed from some invisible constraint. Inside, the party was beginning to wind down. Marcus appeared at the terrace doors, giving Thomas a subtle thumbs up. The presentation had been safely stored, their digital declaration of independence preserved for whatever might come next. "There will be talk," Eleanor mused, her social awareness never completely dormant. "The Whitman merger is still possible," William interrupted, surprising them all. But on different terms. Richard was quite impressed by Sarah's medical ambitions, mentioned something about their healthcare division needing fresh perspectives. And Caroline's father's art galleries could provide an interesting new avenue for corporate expansion. Thomas couldn't help but smile at his father's instinct to find the business angle, but now it felt less like control and more like an attempt to understand, to connect their dreams to his world. Sarah leaned against the terrace railing, her designer dress catching the garden lights. "I was so afraid," she confessed. "Afraid of disappointing you both, afraid of losing our family's respect." "Respect," William repeated, testing the word. "I always thought respect came from following tradition. Tonight you've shown me it comes from having the courage to be true to oneself." He placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder, then Thomas's. "Your great-grandfather broke with his family's farming tradition to start a business. He would understand this moment better than anyone. As the last guests began to leave, their voices carrying across the perfectly maintained lawns, the Hayes family remained on the terrace, talking more openly than they had in years. Eleanor shared stories of her younger days playing piano. William spoke of his secret passion for architecture, and the siblings revealed more of their hopes and plans. The next morning, Dallas society would buzz with talk of the Hayes Gala, but not for the reasons anyone had expected. Instead of discussing business mergers and social alliances, they would speak of authenticity, of courage, of a family choosing to evolve rather than merely maintain. In the following weeks, changes began to appear at the Hayes estate. The guest house buzzed with activity as workers transformed it into a photography studio. Sarah's medical textbooks found their way out of hiding and onto proud display in the family library. Eleanor unearthed her old piano scores, and soft music began to fill the house again. Not for show, but for joy. William's study underwent the most surprising transformation. Alongside the business awards and hunting trophies, he hung one of Thomas's photographs, a black and white image of Sarah volunteering at the hospital, her face alight with purpose as she helped an elderly patient. Below it, he placed his grandfather's original architectural sketches, creating a corner that celebrated passion over obligation. The Hayes legacy was changing, expanding, becoming something richer and more nuanced than mere financial success. In their own ways, each family member was learning to balance tradition with transformation, duty with dreams. One evening, about a month after the gala, Thomas found his father in the new studio, studying the photographs lined up for his first gallery showing. "This one," William said, pointing to an image of a construction worker sharing his lunch with a homeless man. "It reminds me of something my father told me once. He said wealth isn't just what you have, it's what you do with it." From that profound moment in Thomas's studio, the transformation of the Hayes family continued to unfold in unexpected ways. William's words about wealth and purpose became a catalyst for deeper changes within their family dynamic and their approach to their legacy. The next morning, William called an unprecedented family breakfast meeting, not in the formal dining room, but in the sunny kitchen nook where they'd rarely gathered before. Eleanor arrived with her hair slightly disheveled, having just finished her morning piano practice, a new routine she'd embraced with growing confidence. "I've been thinking," William began, watching his family over the rim of his coffee cup, "about how we can reshape Hayes Industries to reflect who we're becoming." His eyes held a new light, one that spoke of possibility rather than obligation. "I've called an emergency board meeting for next week. We're going to create 2 new divisions." Sarah looked up from her medical journal, curiosity piqued. Thomas lowered his camera. He'd been documenting these informal family moments, capturing their evolution in black and white. "The first," William continued, "will be Hayes Healthcare Innovations. Sarah, I want you to be involved in its development, even as you pursue your medical studies. Your perspective as both a future doctor and a Hayes could be invaluable." Sarah's eyes widened, her toast forgotten halfway to her mouth. "Really? But I thought that you had to choose between medicine and the family business?" William smiled. "Perhaps it's time we stopped thinking in terms of either slash or and started thinking about both slash and." Eleanor reached across the table to squeeze her daughter's hand. "Your father's right, and I've already started reaching out to my medical contacts from the charity board. You'd be surprised how many doors open when you combine healthcare with social responsibility." The second division, William turned to Thomas, will be Hayes Visual Communications. Not just photography, but a complete creative agency. Your eye for authentic human moments could transform how we connect with people through our businesses. Thomas felt his throat tighten. "Dad, I don't want to just shoot corporate events and advertising." "Of course not," William interrupted. "That's not what I'm suggesting. Your art should remain your own. But imagine using your skills to tell stories that matter, documenting our healthcare initiatives, capturing the human impact of our work, teaching others to see what you see." The conversation flowed into areas once considered off-limits. They discussed using the Hayes Foundation to establish art therapy programs in hospitals, combining Sarah's medical interest with Thomas's visual storytelling. Eleanor suggested converting part of their extensive grounds into a healing garden where patients could recover and Thomas could teach photography workshops. As they talked, the formal barriers that had long defined their family interactions began to dissolve. William loosened his tie, Eleanor kicked off her shoes, and the siblings felt free to challenge and build upon their parents' ideas. Marcus dropped by later that morning, bringing news from his own family's transformation. Inspired by the Hayes example, other wealthy families in Dallas were beginning to have similar conversations about purpose and passion. "My father actually asked me what I want to do with my life," Marcus reported, helping himself to a muffin with a casualness that would have scandalized Eleanor just months ago. "First time ever. I told him I want to develop educational technology for underserved communities. You know what he said? Let's make it happen." The days that followed brought more changes to the Hayes estate. The formal parlor, once preserved like a museum, became a casual meeting space where Sarah hosted study groups with other pre-med students. The garden paths were redesigned to accommodate future patients, with benches placed strategically for rest and reflection. Thomas's studio became a hub of creative energy. He began mentoring young photographers from less privileged backgrounds, teaching them to use their cameras as tools for social change. The walls filled with their work alongside his own, creating a visual dialogue about community and connection. William found himself spending more time in the studio, his business acumen combining with Thomas's artistic vision in unexpected ways. Together, they developed plans for a documentary series about healthcare access in underserved communities, merging the family's new medical and artistic interests. Eleanor's transformation was perhaps the most surprising. She still organized social events, but now they centered around causes that mattered. The next gala would benefit a medical scholarship fund for underprivileged students, with an exhibition of Thomas's healthcare documentation as its centerpiece. One evening, as the Texas sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, the family gathered on their terrace. The space had become their favorite spot for informal meetings, where hierarchy gave way to honest conversation. "I received a letter from Johns Hopkins today," Sarah announced, her hands trembling slightly as she held the envelope. The family drew closer, their support tangible in the warm evening air. Sarah opened the letter, her eyes scanning quickly, then looking up with tears of joy. "I got into the summer program, and they want to feature our family's healthcare initiatives in their alumni magazine." Celebrations erupted, genuine and unrestrained. William pulled out his phone to cancel his evening meetings, something the old William Hayes would never have done. Eleanor suggested champagne, but also ordered pizza, another departure from protocol that felt perfectly right. As they toasted Sarah's success, Thomas captured the moment with his camera, the golden light, the proud parents, his sister's radiant smile. But this time, he was part of the image too, handing his camera to Marcus to ensure the whole family was in the frame. "To the new Hayes legacy," William proposed, raising his glass. "Built on courage, passion, and purpose. And love," Eleanor added softly, her arm around Sarah. "Built on love." L of continuity from the last paragraph. Escriva em grande quantidade. From that heartfelt toast on the terrace, the Hayes family's transformation began to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond their immediate circle. The next morning, William called another family meeting, this time in Thomas's studio, surrounded by the visual evidence of their evolution. "I've been thinking about scale," he announced, pacing among the photographs, "about how we can take what we've learned as a family and use it to create real change." His business mind was working in harmony with his newly awakened sense of purpose. Eleanor sat at Thomas's editing desk, her reading glasses perched on her nose as she reviewed proposals for the medical scholarship fund. "The response has been overwhelming," she added. "Other families want to contribute, but they want more than just their names on a donor list. They want to be involved." Sarah looked up from her laptop where she'd been coordinating with Johns Hopkins about their summer program. "What if we created a mentorship network? Not just for medical students, but for anyone trying to break free from expected paths?" Thomas, who had been quietly photographing the morning light as it played across his family's animated faces, lowered his camera. "We could document the journeys," he suggested. "Create a visual archive of transformation." The idea took root and grew rapidly. Within weeks, the Hayes Initiative for Personal Excellence, HYPE, was born. The program combined William's business acumen, Eleanor's social networking skills, Sarah's passion for healthcare, and Thomas's artistic vision. The guest house, already partially converted into Thomas's studio, was expanded to include meeting spaces where young people could connect with mentors who had successfully forged their own paths. The walls featured a rotating gallery of Thomas's photographs, documenting these journeys of personal discovery. One of the first success stories was Maria Rodriguez, Mr. Rodriguez's niece, who dreamed of becoming a neurosurgeon but lacked the resources. The Hayes Scholarship Fund covered her pre-med studies, while Sarah's connections at Johns Hopkins helped secure her a valuable internship. Thomas documented Maria's story through his lens, her late-night studying, her first successful lab procedure, the moment she received her acceptance letter to medical school. These images became part of a larger exhibition titled Dreams Unleashed, which opened at the renovated Hayes Gallery downtown. The gallery opening marked another milestone in the family's journey. Instead of the usual society crowd, the space was filled with young dreamers and their mentors. William, wearing jeans for the first time anyone could remember, moved through the crowd not as a business tycoon but as a passionate advocate for change. Eleanor had organized the event with her usual precision, but gone were the crystal champagne flutes and caviar. Instead, food trucks lined the street outside, representing young entrepreneurs who had received support from Hype. The music came from a string quartet of scholarship students from the local performing arts school. Sarah, home from her first session at Johns Hopkins, gave an impromptu speech that brought tears to many eyes. "Success isn't about following a predetermined path," she declared, standing beneath a massive photograph Thomas had taken of their family on the terrace. "It's about having the courage to follow your heart and the support to make it happen." The Hayes Mansion itself continued to evolve. The formal gardens were redesigned as a healing space, with walking paths and meditation areas open to medical patients and their families. Thomas taught photography workshops there, helping others find their artistic voice amid the blooming Texas wildflowers. William's corporate office underwent perhaps the most dramatic transformation. The walls, once adorned with business awards and stock certificates, now displayed a timeline of Hype success stories. His meetings often included not just business leaders but artists, healthcare workers, and young entrepreneurs. One particular autumn evening, as the family gathered for their now regular and formal dinners on the terrace, Marcus arrived with exciting news. His educational technology initiative, supported by Hype, had secured funding to launch in 50 underserved schools across Texas. "None of this would have happened without your family's example," he said, accepting a plate of Eleanor's surprisingly good homemade lasagna. Cooking had become her newest passion. "You showed all of us that it's possible to honor your legacy while creating something new." The conversation flowed late into the night, as it often did now. Sarah shared stories from her medical program, her eyes shining as she described breakthrough moments with patients. Thomas showed rough cuts of his latest documentary project, tracking the journey of Hype participants from initial dreams to remarkable achievements. Eleanor, who had once measured success in social obligations met and appearances maintained, spoke of her plans to expand the scholarship program internationally. Her network of society contacts, once used primarily for arranging advantageous marriages and business connections, now served to identify and support promising young people around the world. William, watching his family's animated discussion, pulled out a small leather notebook, his grandfather's original business diary. "Listen to this," he said, turning to a dog-eared page. "True wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we set free." He wrote this the day he decided to start his first business. From that poignant moment with his grandfather's diary, William felt a renewed sense of purpose. The next morning, he called an emergency meeting of the Hayes Industries Board of Directors, not in the sterile corporate boardroom, but in Thomas's studio gallery, surrounded by the visual evidence of their impact. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, standing beneath a particularly striking photograph of Maria Rodriguez performing her first assisted surgery, "we're not just here to discuss quarterly earnings. We're here to redefine what success means for Hayes Industries." The board members, initially uncomfortable in the casual setting, found themselves drawn into the stories captured on the walls. Thomas had created a special exhibition for this meeting, documenting the ripple effects of their recent initiatives. "Our profits haven't suffered," William continued, pulling up financial projections. "In fact, they've grown. But more importantly, look at these numbers. He gestured to another screen showing the impact metrics of hype. Hundreds of students supported, dozens of new businesses launched, countless lives transformed. Eleanor, who had once measured board meetings by their potential for social networking, now presented a comprehensive plan for expanding their healthcare initiatives globally. Her social connections, once used for arranging power marriages, were being leveraged to create international partnerships with hospitals and educational institutions. Sarah joined the meeting virtually from Johns Hopkins, where she was excelling in her program. Her presentation on integrating medical innovation with social responsibility left several board members visibly moved. She shared stories of patients whose lives had been changed not just by medical care, but by the holistic support system the Hayes initiatives had created. "This isn't charity," she emphasized, her voice clear and confident through the video link. "This is investment in human potential. Every person we help becomes part of a growing network of changemakers." Thomas, who had been quietly photographing the meeting, stepped forward to share his latest project. He had been documenting the transformation of traditional businesses as they adopted the Hayes model of purposeful profit. The images told stories of revitalized communities, renewed purpose, and rekindled dreams. One particularly powerful series focused on the renovation of an abandoned factory in South Dallas. The Hayes initiative had helped convert it into a mixed-use space, part medical training facility, part business incubator, part community arts center. The before and after images were striking, but it was the photographs of people, their faces alight with possibility, that truly told the story. Marcus, who had joined the board as head of their technology division, presented the next phase of their educational initiative. "We're not just providing technology," he explained, pulling up demonstrations of their latest software. "We're creating platforms for dreams to take flight." As the meeting progressed, the traditional barriers between business and social impact continued to dissolve. Board members shared personal stories of how the Hayes transformation had inspired changes in their own families and companies. One member tearfully described how her daughter, inspired by Sarah's example, had finally found the courage to pursue her passion for environmental science. William watched this unprecedented board meeting unfold, feeling a deep sense of rightness. His father's words about true wealth echoed in his mind as he observed these powerful business leaders engaging with purpose beyond profit. The day extended well beyond the planned agenda, evolving into an impromptu strategy session for expanding their impact. Eleanor ordered dinner from one of their hype-supported food entrepreneurs, and the formal business discussion transformed into a passionate exchange of ideas. Late that evening, as the last board members departed, the Hayes family gathered in their favorite spot on the terrace. The Texas sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, as if nature itself was celebrating their continued evolution. "I received another letter from Johns Hopkins today," Sarah announced, her face glowing in the golden light. "They want to create a partnership program with Hype, full scholarships for promising students who combine medical studies with social innovation." Thomas immediately reached for his camera, capturing the joy on his sister's face. These moments of triumph, large and small, were becoming part of a visual narrative that told the story of not just their family, but of a movement. Eleanor, who had kicked off her shoes and let her carefully styled hair down, shared her own news. "The International Medical Alliance wants to feature our program at their next conference. They're calling it the Hayes Model, combining business acumen with social purpose." William pulled out his grandfather's diary again, turning to a new page he'd discovered. "Listen to this. Success without purpose is like a house without a foundation. It may look impressive, but it cannot withstand the storms of time." As the family absorbed these words, a warm breeze carried the scent of jasmine from their newly planted healing garden. The sound of laughter drifted up from the community center they'd built on the edge of their property, where a group of Hype participants was holding their evening meeting. "We should document all of this," Thomas mused, gesturing to the growing campus their estate had become. "Not just the big moments, but the small ones too. The real transformation happens in the in-between spaces." L of continuity from the last paragraph escriva M. grande quantidade from Thomas's thoughtful observation about documenting transformation. A new chapter in the Hayes legacy began to unfold. The next morning, while the Texas dawn painted the sky in soft pastels, he started work on what would become his most ambitious project yet, Legacy Reimagined, The Quiet Revolution. The documentary series would capture not just the Hayes family's journey, but the ripple effects of their transformation throughout the community and beyond. William, seeing the potential impact, immediately allocated resources from Hayes Industries to support the project. "We need to show that change isn't just about grand gestures," Thomas explained during a family breakfast meeting, spreading his storyboards across the kitchen island. "It's about the daily decisions, the small moments of courage that add up to something revolutionary." Sarah, home for a brief break from Johns Hopkins, added her perspective. "Like my patient yesterday at the community clinic, a young girl who wants to be a doctor. Seeing our healing garden and meeting other medical students through hype made her believe it's possible. Those are the stories we need to tell." Eleanor, who had transformed their weekly society luncheons into brainstorming sessions for social innovation, saw another dimension. "We should include the families who've been part of our journey, show how breaking free from traditional expectations has strengthened, not weakened, their legacies." The project quickly grew beyond its initial scope. Marcus developed an interactive digital platform where people could share their own stories of transformation. The website, designed with his signature attention to accessibility, became a virtual gathering place for dreamers and changemakers around the world. William, inspired by the growing movement, made a bold announcement at the next Hayes Industries shareholders meeting. "Starting today, we're implementing the legacy impact rating across all our divisions. Profit margins will no longer be our only measure of success." The business world took notice. The Hayes model began appearing in economic journals and business school case studies. But more importantly, other wealthy families started reaching out, wanting to learn how they could implement similar changes in their own enterprises. The Hayes Mansion, once a symbol of isolated privilege, became a hub of continuous activity. The Healing Garden hosted daily meditation sessions for medical patients. The converted guest house welcomed aspiring artists and entrepreneurs for workshops and mentoring sessions. Even the formal dining room had been transformed into a collaborative space where different groups could meet and share ideas. One particularly memorable evening, the family hosted a gathering that would have been unimaginable just a year ago. Medical students mingled with business executives, artists shared ideas with tech entrepreneurs, and community leaders engaged in deep discussions with society figures who had once been concerned only with maintaining their social status. Sarah, standing at the podium they'd set up in the garden, shared news that brought tears to many eyes. "Thanks to the combined efforts of Hype and our medical partners, we'll be opening 5 new community health centers across Texas. Each one will include space for art therapy, business mentorship, and educational programs." Thomas captured the moment the announcement was made. The joy on his sister's face, the pride in their parents' eyes, the hopeful expressions of those who would benefit from this latest initiative. But he also captured the quiet moments afterward. 2 young artists discussing their dreams in the Healing Garden, a retired executive mentoring a startup founder by the fountain, a medical student showing a child how to use a stethoscope. Eleanor, who had once measured success by the exclusivity of her guest lists, now took greatest pride in the diversity of their gatherings. She moved through the crowd, not to maintain social appearances, but to make meaningful connections between people who could help each other grow. William found himself in deep conversation with a group of business leaders who had flown in from across the country to learn about the Hayes model. The real secret, he told them, gesturing to the vibrant scene around them, is understanding that wealth isn't just financial. It's the richness of purpose, the abundance of possibility, the dividend of dreams realized. As the evening progressed, Marcus unveiled the latest feature of their digital platform, a real-time map showing the growing network of Hayes-inspired initiatives around the world. Points of light sparkled across the display, each representing a story of transformation, a dream taking flight, a barrier broken. "This is just the beginning," he explained, zooming in on different regions. "Each light represents someone who has taken the courage to redefine their own legacy. And look at how they're connecting, creating new opportunities for others." Later that night, as the family gathered for their now traditional evening reflection on the terrace, Thomas shared the rough cut of the documentary's opening sequence. The footage moved seamlessly between past and present, contrasting the rigid formality of their old life with the vibrant energy of their new reality. L of continuity from the last paragraph. Escriva M. Grande quantidade from that powerful screening on the terrace. The impact of Legacy Reimagined began to take on a life of its own. The next morning, Thomas's studio was buzzing with activity as his team began editing the thousands of hours of footage they'd collected. "We need to show the contrast," he explained to his family, who had gathered to view more rough cuts. "Not just between then and now, but between perception and reality." The screens around them displayed parallel narratives. The polished facade of wealth alongside the authentic moments of human connection that now define their lives. Sarah, who had brought her medical journal along to the viewing, suddenly looked up with an inspired gleam in her eye. "What if we integrated patient stories with the documentation? Show how the ripple effects of change touch real lives." She pulled out her tablet and played a video she'd recorded at one of the community health centers. A young mother, once unable to afford health care for her children, was now not only receiving treatment but also participating in the center's business development program. She had started a small catering company, supported by Hype's entrepreneurship initiative. William, watching the footage, reached for his grandfather's diary. "There's something here about authentic success," he said, flipping through the pages. "Listen to this entry from 1952. Today I realize that every dollar we earn must have a purpose beyond profit. Money without meaning is like a map without a destination." Eleanor, who had been quietly taking notes, shared her latest vision. "We should organize a global symposium," she suggested. "Not just another charity gala, but a real gathering of minds. Bring together all the families and organizations who've adopted the Hayes model, share stories, learn from each other." The idea quickly gained momentum. Marcus began developing a virtual platform that would allow participants from around the world to join in real time. "We'll create digital rooms that mirror the physical spaces of the Hayes estate," he explained, pulling up his designs. "People can move between sessions, join conversations, share their experiences." The preparations for the symposium transformed the Hayes estate once again. The gardens were enhanced with outdoor meeting spaces, each designed to facilitate different types of conversations. The former ballroom became a multimedia presentation space, its walls lined with screens showing real-time updates from Hayes-inspired initiatives worldwide. Thomas's documentary became the centerpiece of the symposium's opening night. The family gathered in the screening room for a final preview, each segment revealing new layers of their journey. Scene 1. The Hayes mansion from above, the camera swooping down to reveal the evolution from isolated estate to vibrant community hub. Scene 2. Sarah in her white coat, moving confidently through hospital corridors, intercut with footage of young students she'd mentored now following their own medical dreams. Scene 3. Eleanor hosting one of her new style gatherings, where business leaders and community activists found common ground and forged powerful alliances. Scene 4. William in the renovated Hayes Industries boardroom, explaining the legacy impact rating system to a group of international executives. Scene 5. The Hype success stories, dozens of faces, hundreds of dreams, thousands of lives touched by the ripple effect of purposeful change. As the preview ended, the family sat in emotional silence. "This isn't just our story anymore," Thomas said softly. "It belongs to everyone who's found the courage to challenge traditional definitions of success." The symposium itself exceeded all expectations. Over 3 days, the Hayes estate welcomed changemakers from 6 continents. The Healing Garden hosted dawn meditation sessions where CEOs sat alongside community organizers. The converted guest house buzzed with workshops on everything from sustainable business practices to arts-based community development. Sarah led a particularly powerful session on integrating social purpose into medical education, presenting alongside several of her Johns Hopkins mentors. Her patient stories, documented through Thomas's lens, moved many to tears and sparked commitments from other wealthy families to fund similar initiatives in their own communities. Eleanor, in her element but in an entirely new way, orchestrated the complex dance of connections and collaborations. She had an uncanny ability to bring together people whose combined talents could solve seemingly insurmountable problems. William found himself in deep conversations with other business leaders about redefining corporate success. The Hayes model was no longer just an interesting experiment. It was becoming a movement, a new way of thinking about wealth, purpose, and legacy. Marcus's digital platform hummed with activity, connecting participants across time zones and languages. The virtual spaces he'd created became as lively as the physical ones, with ideas and inspirations flowing freely between them. During a break between sessions, Thomas found his father standing in the healing garden, watching as a young artist taught a group of medical patients how to use photography as therapy.